Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Monday, February 22nd, 2021. Time for another show. Time for another week of shows. Time for us to get out of here. I can't believe we're back at it. It's Monday again already. And, well, there's lots to cover, of course. And as you know, we like to do these weekend roundups on a Monday. I suppose we'd prefer to do them on a Tuesday or Wednesday. But Monday is the day we get to do these things. Let's see what we have on tap this morning. Bill knows, because he's in Portland, Maine, and I'm here, so why wouldn't I have no idea what I was going to do and rely on somebody who is several states away, and accurate as usual. Let's see what he's got here. The Kagro in the Morning radio show is live now. That so far is true. Attorney General nominee Merrick Garland's confirmation hearings start today. Is that right? Oh, terrific. Wonderful. He's finally getting some hearings. And Kagro X, me, David Waldman, wonders if he'll show up with a crowbar or a baseball bat. That's the way you're supposed to enter the Capitol these days, I understand. And it's perfectly permissible. So as long as he staples a flag to it, I think it's all good. So, weapon of choice for Merrick Garland. I guess for the time being, it's one of those terms we don't get to use a whole lot, is designate. Attorney General designate. I don't know why I'm changing the emphasis on these things. But okay, so he's the nominee, and we sit and wait for them to get through this. I don't think he's going to have any serious problems getting confirmed, but he's Merrick Garland, so people like to troll with his nomination these days and play games with it. Lots going on, of course, including, I think I'll put this aside for later investigation as well. I'll make mention of it now. Happened to see a tweet go by that says, Representative Charlie Crist of Florida asks the Department of Justice to investigate Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, which I assume is something stemming from out of his strange and preferential distribution of vaccines in Florida. He's been quite open about playing politics with the distribution of the vaccine down there. So we'll catch up on that and see whether, I don't know. Should we just jump right in and find out if that's what it's about? At least we'll get some idea of what it's going to be. You know, if that's it. If it's something new, coronavirus vaccine. So we'll get to the details perhaps later of what he's doing in case that is new to you. But let's see, other items on today's agenda include, the hearings for Merrick Garland. We also I had forgotten, CPAC is underway, and that's usually a big event, of course, and takes up at least some of our time, the crazy speeches that are being given. I guess a somewhat diminished event this year, thankfully, because Donald Trump is no longer pretending to be president. And that's good news. He was a big fan of CPAC, and he would go there and give those hour-plus long rambling speeches, just go and collect accolades there. And at least that's done, and he can't be bothered with anything. He's playing golf down in Florida. But the local kooks and the people who still make it their business to show up in Washington, D.C. and collect accolades will be doing that. And as I understand it, it's, as you might have guessed, chock full of, what we can call election denialists at this point, plus insurrection denialists, as we now find out. I saw yesterday, I'm sure Greg has tucked away somewhere, a poll cited. All I saw was a screen grab, so I didn't see all the details, like who conducted the poll and do they know what they're talking about. But the question was put to Trump voters, essentially. I don't know how the question was asked, but they asked them which of the following things they thought was what happened on January 6th. And, I can only imagine asking them, so what do you think happened on January 6th? Greg, is this is it USA Today Suffolk, the one I'm talking about, or is this something else you're sending me just by coincidence? I'll find out later. But anyway, he'll straighten it all out for you, but it might be that that's what it is. Asked him what happened on January 6th, and 58% of them said, hell if I know. They actually said, oh, that was the Antifa false flag attack on the U.S. Capitol, or an attack inspired by Antifa. I don't even know what they must have thought they were answering with. I mean, I'm not certain how the choice was posed to them. But anyway, the point is that 58% of Trump voters were sure that it wasn't Trump voters who stormed the Capitol. 28%, only 28% of Trump voters correctly identified the invaders of the Capitol as other Trump voters. No word on whether any of that 28% were the Trump voters who invaded the Capitol, of course. And I have reason to believe that some significant percentage of them would probably answer that it wasn't them and that it was Antifa, even though they were there. I guess you could take some comfort in the fact that I believe 4%, and I think there's probably, as Greg, I think, says there's a screen grab in our Skype list here, but 4% said, oh no, that was Donald Trump attempting to take over the United States government by a coup, or an autogolpe, I suppose. If we had offered them that chance, they would have said that. 3% would have said that. 1% would have said, I think the term coup covers it correctly, and we would have had a metaphysical discussion about that. But I'm glad at least some of them saw it clearly. I guess together that would be 28 to 32% at least have a correct view of what happened. And it's just amazing what people are telling themselves. And I just wonder, how many people are out there continuing to convince themselves that this was somebody else perpetrating this attack. I think I also saw, in response to that, here comes Greg. In response to that, I did see somebody else tweeting, and I may have even put it away because it was just so clever, but I certainly retweeted it and can find it that way, that somebody had said, how it is. If it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck and whatever else it might do like a duck. Of course, you know what it is. It's Antifa in a duck costume pretending to do this to make us look bad. Sure. It's amazing how many things Republicans and Trump voters think are going on. One, the bad things that happen that aren't them. And two, how many things they think people are doing to make them look bad. That, I guess, brings us to another topic from over the weekend. AOC down in Texas delivering the proceeds of a week-long fundraiser for folks suffering from the weather conditions in Texas, and showing up and not only delivering the money, but delivering supplies and physically doing the work of moving those supplies, found herself under attack by some segment of the conservative online, the very online conservative population. This was not a genuine philanthropic effort, not a genuine humanitarian effort, but rather simply trolling to make Ted Cruz and other Republicans who wouldn't lift a finger to help anybody look bad. Although I did see an interesting collection, another intrepid reporter out there looking at the Facebook groups from certain local communities, and there was a lot of pushback from among the conservative folks there saying, look, love her or hate her, this is good work, and credit where credit is due. So at least there are at least some of those people still around and kicking in Texas, too. So some good news on that front. Greg Dworkin is here, along with all of the usual event and political roundup of the weekend, and explanation for the dynamics of the show as well. I saw that. Good morning, Greg. How are you?
Right. I thought I would include it in the overall theme for today. We won't just do the chaos of the weekend because Biden's president, so it's not quite as chaotic as it used to be. Right. But I think today's theme is going to be lessons learned. And one of the lessons that I keep learning, because I'm hoping that if I keep saying it and keep reading it, then eventually I'll remember it. But there's actually a technical term for the way David and I interact with each other, which is called cooperative overlapping, which is a really fancy way to say I keep interrupting him all the time. But it's normal. That is normal conversation, at least in the Northeast. And I recall
Yeah.
When I moved to Connecticut, I had to keep explaining to my patients in the office, I'm not interrupting you because I'm rude. I'm interrupting you because I'm listening. If I'm not interrupting, it
engage
means I'm
with
not
you.
listening, and you better kick me.
Yeah, this is my engagement with your content before there was content. I mean, there was, but they didn't know it was called content till now.
Right, I'm listening to you, and somebody's wrong on the internet, and so I have to fix it,
Exactly.
But it's just the
Yeah.
way I grew up. So that's
This is a
important.
great article. I'll include it in the roundup. Everyone can look at it.
And there's a book.
A book.
I mean, there's
That's
actually
long version
a
of an
book
article.
written by a linguist, Deborah Tannen, who coined the term, and she should get credit for that.
Yes.
But yeah, it's important to realize. Now, there's another set of lessons, a whole bunch of lessons that I think we can learn today. For example, one of the things that's cool to do right now that the Republicans think is going to gain traction is criticize Joe Biden on his plans for reopening schools.
Okay.
And as Paul Waldman reminds us back here in the fact-based community, it's fine to criticize what the Biden administration said about school openings, but people do realize that the federal government doesn't decide whether your schools are open, right?
Ted Cruz.
That's a state
knows
and local decision, not by the president.
Yes, and that's why Joe Biden is going to Cancun.
Well, that's another lesson learned, isn't it?
Okay. Yes.
So, the thing about schools and school openings, including the very complicated, and I think we did this a little bit last week in terms of school openings, is it really depends upon the amount of virus going on in your community. That more than anything else.
Yes.
Also, the fact that school buildings tend to be really old and decrepit, and very rarely do they have excellent ventilation and air conditioning. And other things that are important to have an idea of, like you don't want to have a virus classroom and a virus-free classroom and then pump all the virus into the the virus-free one. I mean, you really have to have an idea what's going on with the circulation of air in your building. So a lot of this is actually not that difficult to do. Did you know that they actually make portable carbon dioxide detectors? Not carbon monoxide, so that you don't die.
How?
But small handheld carbon dioxide detectors, relatively cheap, and you can get an idea of the level of carbon dioxide in a room. And if it's over 1,000 parts per million, for example, the ventilation is starting to get not so good. But if it's really low, then you have excellent ventilation. So there's ways to check that's not going to break the budget. Well, you don't have to put one in every room. You can just walk around with one and check room to room to room. Just as an example, that the science is there to do a lot of this, but the political will to do it is not, because people hate investing money in the school system. And speaking of the school systems, another lesson to remember, and this from my friend on Twitter, Tim Fournier, who, by the way, is a younger brother of former political columnist Ron Fournier,
how many Fourniers
who's now
could there be?
a PR flack in his hometown of Detroit. Tim is an educator. And says, in case you missed it, schools have been open for instruction throughout the pandemic. Teachers have been working harder than ever throughout the pandemic, and arguments to the contrary reveal a frightening lack of knowledge about schooling. I mean, the teachers have to prepare in-person lectures, home teaching, hybrids, both, still be responsible for what's going on with the kids. Now, it doesn't mean that they're perfect. Sometimes they make mistakes. One of the mistakes they may make is not adjusting to individual students who have individual issues with this hybrid model. I mean, say for the sake of argument, you have, ADHD or something like that. One size does not fit all. So, people have to be responsive. But in general, everybody's working twice as hard. The college professors who have to lecture but also prepare online lectures are doing twice the work for the same amount of money. And in this capitalist society, let's not forget that the fruits of your labor are supposed to be rewarded. And in the teaching profession, probably not as much as you deserve.
No.
I say that from, Newtown, Connecticut, where school teachers save kids' lives, and, it's part of their job. So I think a lot of lessons learned and then sometimes forgotten, it's worthwhile relearning.
Yes.
So there's that. Here's another one. You can't just go around making charges against people and companies, especially, that are lies.
Can't I?
and expect to get away with it.
All right.
Mike Lindell is now being hit with a $1 billion suit, the My Pillow guy,
Yeah, okay.
by Dominion for
Right.
a Dominion defamation suit. And this is how the defamation suit opens. After hitting the jackpot with Donald Trump's endorsement for My Pillow, and after $1 million bet on Fox News ads that paid out handsome returns, this is actually from the court filing, Michael Lindell exploited another chance to boost sales, marketing My Pillow to people who would tune in and attend rallies to hear Lindell tell the big lie that Dominion had stolen the 2020 election. As when My Pillow previously faced legal action for deceptive marketing campaigns, Lindell knew there was no real evidence supporting his claim, and he's well aware of the independent audits and paper ballot recounts conclusively disproving the big lie. But Lindell, a talented salesman and former professional card counter, tells the lie to this day because the lie sells pillows.
Well.
And so you're going to have to pay for your lie.
But okay. Good. All right.
That's
sure. I mean, and if
right?
the lie
he may
sells
not
pillows,
understand
get some of
decency,
those.
and he may not understand facts, and he may not understand science, and he may not understand the law. But I think maybe he'll understand getting hit with $1 billion suit.
Yeah. Here, do you understand?
Not
I
one
took
you wear,
your money.
the one you have to pay for. Yeah.
Wow. All right. Well, I'm glad that they're doing it. We've been tracking that for a while, and it doesn't look good for him.
Right. Here's another part of it.
Fine.
My Pillow began offering a promotion where if customers entered the promo code QAnon at checkout, they would receive a $45 discount.
If I wanted one of those pillows, would I do that?
A not so subtle nod to the 45th president of the United States.
It's not very subtle at all. That is true. Right. I am an insurrectionist. 21. That's a discount code too. That's. I wonder if
the
I
thing
really
I love
would
about
do that.
this is like the actuaries who sit down and say, okay, let's ask for a reasonable amount of damages. Wherefore, Dominion respectfully requests the court enter an award of not less than $1,303,470.
Sure.
And judgment in its favor against all defendants jointly and severally as follows. So the company gets $651 million.
Oh, okay.
And then for
rest?
compensatory damages, and then you also get punitive damages.
Right, there should be.
And then awarding Dominion all expenses and costs, including attorney's fees.
Okay. So that's probably, what is it? How much more than $1 billion?
So $1,303,470.
1.3. Okay. That's a lot of pillows.
$303,470,000, right? And I'm surprised they didn't hit. And 32 cents.
Right. Payable in casino chips, I guess, if he's a card counter.
Something like that. So there's a lesson there.
Oh, yeah, maybe. Although he keeps going. So.
Okay. Now, you brought up the USA Today Suffolk poll.
That's what it was. Okay, good.
And that's what it was. And the question was asked specifically about, who caused the problem. And the wording was they were asked to describe Trump voters only what happened during the assault. And that's where they spontaneously came out with Antifa. So,
really?
Again, it's a reminder that many Trump voters only listen to Fox News and right-wing places like OANN and Newsmax.
Yeah.
Newsmax, by the way, a sponsor of My Pillow. They always have them on to explain things. Even when they take them off, they put them on later. So I'm wondering whether those folks, if they haven't already, are going to get hit with suits as well. I know that some of them have. But they're all worried about those suits. But in any case, the exclusive poll from USA Today Suffolk defeated and impeached. Trump still commands the loyalty of the GOP's voters. That's the theme. If there's a civil war in the Republican Party, the voters who back Donald Trump are ready to choose sides behind Trump. An exclusive Suffolk University USA Today poll finds Trump support largely unshaken after a second impeachment trial by double digits, 46-27. Those surveyed say they would abandon the GOP and join the Trump party if the former president decided to create one, and the rest are undecided. Now, there's a lot of different ways you could read that. Half of the Republicans, 46%, would abandon the GOP and join the Trump party, and some are undecided. A quarter would not.
Okay.
So if they split, neither party is going to win elections.
I'm for that.
They're not going to win national elections. They're not going to win presidential elections. I don't think Trump cares about anything but a presidential election. No. It's like a party of one, like Joe Lieberman,
Yeah,
it's not exactly that they're going to run a whole bunch of people on the down ticket because that would take work, and that's not what Trump is interested in.
No,
But
at least not when
you
he's
could look
running.
at it and say, "Oh my goodness, half of the party would desert Trump, desert the GOP, and go with Trump." But the other side of that coin is that half the party would not.
Yes.
And so that's not particularly strong support from a party.
No, I guess that's not good.
I mean, if you were looking at, well, what if, I don't know, pick somebody you think might be a presidential candidate at some point, a relatively neutral figure, what if the senator from Minnesota, Amy Klobuchar, decided to run in a snowstorm, and she got 46% of the votes?
Is it a primary? 'Cause that's okay.
That means, in a primary. That means 54% want somebody else.
True, but it
If
sometimes
there's only
works.
people running, that's a terrible number.
Oh, well then yes. But,
Right? If there's 17 people
Democratic
running,
primary,
that's
there's
pretty good. But if there's only one person running, that's
right.
bad.
The whole state of New Hampshire is running.
And forget about two people. What if she's the only candidate? Amy Klobuchar is the only candidate in the Democratic primary, and she gets 46% backing.
I will tell you what, don't get in the car with her after that. I wouldn't.
Not if she has something to throw, but still, those are terrible numbers.
Yeah, well, sure. Let's see if it happens.
Right? Well, no, it's not happening, and so that's part of the backup here is two other articles from the Bulwark who looks at such things. One is by Tim Miller,
shouldn't have. They're smart,
which is a great writer, by the way. The Republicans uncivil on war. Mitch versus Trump? No.
Okay, right.
And he gives examples. Take Ohio. All right, Rob Portman is retiring. Somebody has to run.
Yes.
A dour, sullen, unsmiling political hack. That was former President Donald Trump's assessment of Mitch McConnell in a press release this week.
Yeah.
Okay. But underneath the war of words was the substance of Trump's threat in the statement he promised to back primary rivals.
Yes.
So might Cocaine Mitch get the last laugh? No. Call me skeptical, he says. Out there in America where the so-called Civil War is going to be fought, it sounds a lot more like a dinnertime family dispute at Jeff Davis' country home than the Battle of Antietam. Right? The Ohio Senate race, nice preview. Two major declared candidates in the GOP contest to replace the retiring Rob Portman. First, Josh Mandel, formerly state treasurer back in 2012. He ran for Senate against Sherrod Brown as your conventional Marco Rubio, Eric Cantor, Mitt Romney-style Republican. And the second is Jane Timken, the former Ohio GOP chair, Harvard graduate, wife of the steel magnate. Both had been allies of the centrist Republican Governor John Kasich, and Timken even supported his bid for president in 2016.
Sure.
Now, if you're not familiar with Ohio politics, you might think that both of these candidates would be on the McConnell side of the Civil War. And there must be some Jim Jordan style, and he spells it G-Y-M, Jim Jordan style Trumpkin waiting in the wings. But the fact is, both Timken and Mandel are competing in the Trump lane. After Trump beat Kasich in 2016, Mandel started vouching for Pizzagate Jack Posobiec when Timken Brutus John Kasich and cleansed the state party of anybody who wore the scarlet K.
Really?
So now they're both Trumpers, and they're competing in the Trump lane. And Tim goes on basically to make the point, this is what's going on in the parties at state and local level.
Yes.
So there's not much of a war. The Trump side wins. That's who they'll be running.
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. I don't know how genuine their Trump support is, but I mean, that's not really the point. So
that is not the point. The point is that if you want to run and decide, this is what's happening. In other words, if you have a conventional fellow, and here's another example, Arkansas. Arkansas is another front in the GOP Civil War that wasn't. We all know by now that Sarah Huckabee Sanders is running for governor based on her experience as the most deft liar among the cadre of Trump press secretaries. But this development wasn't met with immediate excitement among the Republican establishment in the natural state. Capital letters, that's Arkansas.
Is that right? I had no idea.
Yeah. You see, before Sarah Huckabee Sanders asserted the Trumpian right of prima nocta.
Okay.
Explain that one. On the Little Rock State House.
Wait, so say that again? How did it go?
Prima nocta?
Yeah, right. No, I recognize what the term is, but how did they use it?
She asserted the Trumpian right of prima nocta on the Little Rock State House.
I see. I think
So what
he
does
just
that
wanted
mean?
to say that prima nocta. Well, I mean, my understanding of that comes from like what maybe one of the from Braveheart. I don't really know what the actual historical reality of it was, but it's portrayed there as even at the time at which Braveheart is set, in what's that, 1300s, already recognized as like an ancient and dormant noble right, but it was described as the right of a noble, the noblemen, there weren't any others, to sleep with any bride married on his land.
Right. So to
That
spread the
first
noble
night.
seed, which would be a good thing for the country.
Terrific. I don't know if I really would apply that to but okay,
Well,
she's trying to assert some sort of natural
so
rights.
he's talking
to
about
it.
Tim Griffin, who's Arkansas lieutenant governor, and Griffin did everything right. He was elected by the Tea Party. He ran for lieutenant governor. He waited his turn. He, went to all the meetings. He went to all the dinners on the rubber chicken circuit. He did everything. And he wasn't in any sense a Trump Republican in style or substance, but he went along with it to the extent required of a local GOP elected. And along comes Sarah Huckabee Sanders, whose only credentials that she's closer to Trump than anybody in America outside of the family. That's capital letters. And bowing to reality, Griffin gave up his dreams without a fight because now he's running for attorney general because Sarah Huckabee Sanders is there. Another example of at the state level, it's all Trump.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly has come out that way. I don't know. I wonder how the election might have come out. But yeah, it's awful. I mean, she really hasn't got any qualifications. Her dad was governor, and that's how she got the job with Trump, and then she did a bad job with Trump.
Right. But the point is she stepped in because she can, and that's really where we're going with this. More of this after the break.
Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Greg Dworkin's still with us and still giving us lessons to learn today, or describing ones we did
lessons.
learn.
I was telling David during the break, I already forgot the term cooperative. I'm talking. Shut up. Cooperative overlap. I remember the cooperative part, but I always forget the overlap.
All right, I'll remember the overlap part. I will not, but I'll do my best.
Yeah, well, I'm halfway there. But the lesson learned in Arkansas and Ohio and other places is that if you think there's a so-called GOP civil war going on because you have the Arkansas current governor, Asa Hutchinson, saying he will not support Trump in 2024, that's great. But the reality is Sarah Huckabee Sanders is going to be the next governor, not him.
I mean, I guess so. It would be really a shame for that to come true. So I don't know. Fingers crossed. But no one's going.
The GOP is learning that lesson at the state level, and so expect more Trumpy, more vote suppression, more crazy people running. Now it's going to backfire, I think, but I'm not saying that confidently, and that gets us to our next piece, which is a wonderful piece by Perry Bacon Jr., who I've been following since he was a columnist at the Washington Post, these many years ago. He used to have a column called Talking Points. And then Josh Marshall first had Talking Points Memo. And so the Washington Post, the big guy, decided to sue the little guy. Marshall won. Talking Points disappeared. And Perry Bacon went on to NBC News, and now he's at 538. But he's a really good, sharp reporter.
Okay. Well, that's all right. Lost the lawsuit, but okay.
Well,
it wasn't his idea.
It was his paper. 9 lessons I learned about political reporting while covering Trump. And the reason I give the preamble about Perry Bacon and where he's been and what he's done is that he's no rookie to following, politics at the national level.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And he tells this story. In the fall of 2015, I was having drinks in Washington with a colleague at the time, now MSNBC host Joy Reid. He was working at NBC News, and so was she. Donald Trump was leading in the polls in the presidential primary, and I was confident. I, Perry Bacon Jr., studier of national politics, was confident he wouldn't win the nomination. Very confident.
Right, sure.
I told Joy, who's a friend, that Trump was experiencing a sugar high in the polls, not unlike Herman Cain. And I predicted the Republican establishment would organize against Trump and embrace the obvious candidate for the party's future, Barack Obama for the right, Marco Rubio of Florida.
Aha. Okay. Marco
Joy
thought so
was
too.
equally confident. She's from Florida. Trump was speaking about racial issues in a way that would resonate with the GOP base, she told me. She hinted that neither I nor the GOP party establishment really understood the base, and she laughed as I hyped Rubio. Joy had lived in Florida before moving to New York City to work at MSNBC. She'd cover Rubio closely and was extremely confident he didn't have the skills to defeat Trump, particularly if Trump made race a central issue in the campaign. I remember this conversation from more than 5 years ago so clearly because it encapsulates much of my experience as a political journalist in the Trump era. In 2015, when Trump announced his candidacy, I'd been covering national politics for 13 years, including 3 presidential campaigns. I've been savvy at times, describing Obama as the likely winner in 2008, and I assumed I knew a lot about how politics in America worked, and then Trump came along, and over the next 5+ years, I learned a lot about covering national politics. Some lessons came the hard way, by being really wrong. So now that we're about a month into a new presidential administration, I'm trying to keep these lessons front and center, and what are they? Here are 9 that are worth listening to.
All right.
Number 1, listen more to black people.
That sounds like a good one.
Right?
Yeah.
Then Representative Keith Ellison on ABC News This Week, who's now a Minnesota Attorney General, said he thought Trump had a decent chance of winning. The other panelists on the segment laughed at Ellison's remark. I'm not singling them out. At the time, I was mocking the idea of Trump winning. But Ellison, like Joy, is black, and that's worth thinking about more. It wasn't only black political observers who proved prescient about Trump. This section could be about people of color as opposed to just black people. For example, from the start of Trump's campaign in 2015, Univision's Jorge Ramos centered his coverage about how Trump spoke about immigrants.
Sure, right.
CBS News' Weijia Yang, whose family immigrated to the U.S. from China, and apologies for pronunciation, when she was a kid, sometimes asked the president very blunt questions about racial issues. I thought fairly long and hard about the framing of this section of the article, and will admit the obvious. Perhaps I'm biased toward noticing the work of black people because I'm black myself. Part of this is media dynamics, at least right now. Many of the most high-profile writers and pundits are black, and not as many are Asian or Latino. But we're making a point about not just black pundits, but also black voters. And black voters have been more unified in opposing Trump than Asian or Hispanic Americans. And black political observers were often the ones most bullish about Trump's chances from the start and the most willing during his campaign to speak bluntly about his racial and at times racist language and why some of his supporters liked it.
Sure.
And by the end of Trump's presidency, covering Trump this way was mainstream, but black journalists were often the ones taking the first approach, while white colleagues often cast Trump's action in racial terms only when it was no longer controversial to do so. And black experts were often those who most forcefully rejected the argument that Trump's appeal was primarily based on feelings of economic anxiety, or that Trump's ideas should be taken seriously but not literally. Right?
Well, it stands to reason, I think.
Two black political experts, in particular, Adam Serwer and Ta-Nehisi Coates, then at The Atlantic dubbed Trump the first white president.
Yeah, all right. I mean, they got it right. And I was going to say that it stands to reason. I mean, pundits of color, and in particular, I guess as he says here, black pundits are I think, quick to recognize when they're dealing with dyed-in-the-wool dyed-in-the-wool racists in a way that the rest of us might not pick up on necessarily right away, or even if we pick up on it, we may say, well, that's not really, where the vast majority of American voters are, whereas communities of color can say, yeah, you don't want to think of it that way, but it's actually true that is where they are, and It's sad, and not all white people. I understand you're not racist, and that's why you're having trouble with this. But you don't always see it when your neighbor is, because they're not racist to you.
But an awful lot of non-college white Trump voters are racist, and it is an economic anxiety. And the people who went to that Capitol protest could afford to be there and buy all the gear.
That is definitely true. Yeah,
so he says, secondly, most of the prominent black political observers who were suggesting that Trump could be formidable, like Ellison and Joy, were openly left-leaning in their professional roles. Perry Bacon Jr., tended back then to think such people's opinions were clouding their views of the facts, while a person like me, not in an opinion role, could see politics more clearly, which leads me to a second lesson.
Okay.
Obviously one he didn't learn during the Iraq War.
Well, there were
when the left-leaning bloggers got it right, were labeled as, DFHs.
Yeah.
Dirty frickin' hippies.
I'm glad he's
But,
up close,
just because you're left and just because you're partisan doesn't mean you get it wrong. So he says, my second lesson is mix up your media diet.
Okay.
Going into 2015, I looked for insights about politics, mostly from other political reporters or political scientists who focused on the U.S., as opposed to journalists who are opinion writers and columnists and scholars who don't specialize in American politics. And that's who I followed on Twitter, and that group shaped my view of what was happening. And these aren't bad sources of information, but Trump himself and how he reshaped American politics often befuddled traditional experts on American politics who were looking to compare and contrast things like that he did with Clinton and George W. Bush and Obama and other more establishment politicians. Now, as a personal note here, I have these rather affectionate and, well-meaning arguments all the time with the political scientists I follow on Twitter. David Carroll, who I believe is one of the authors of The Party Decides, along with Hans Noel. David Carroll and I got into this discussion about what effect Trump's demeaning of the military would mean in terms of the vote. And I was of the opinion that it matters. And at the margins, it means he's not going to get the solid military vote that other Republicans have gotten in recent years. And Dave Carroll said, LOL, nothing matters. And, it's going to be what it always is. In fact, Trump really did poorly with the military vote. And I kept showing him polls that showed he's doing poorly with the military vote. And he said, yeah, but if you go back and look at this and this and this and this, they always come around. Well, just because they always did doesn't mean they're going to, I guess is my point. Yeah, and we had that discussion, and it turned out I was right. Now, he's right about everything else. But you can't just say, okay, this is the way it's always been, and therefore that's the way it's always going to be. You will 99% of the time be right if you take that attitude, but you're always going to miss when things change. And sometimes things, in fact, change. So that's my rant on just assuming that because it worked that way before, that's what's going to happen now. You see it now when you have political scientists describe the inevitable loss of the House in 2022, because that's the way it always happens in a first-term presidency.
Yes.
Except when it doesn't.
Right. Or maybe you're listening to a financial report on the radio, and all the disclaimer language, if you listen to it, says...
Right, exactly. Past performance doesn't, and all of that. And so we have a pandemic. We have unique things going on. We have a split in the party in terms of where the party should go. Even if the Trump side is dominant, if you lose 10%, that may mean the difference between winning and losing, because most of these elections are a lot closer than that. And so, if you look at the House this year, basically Democrats lost all the close ones. What if they won all the close ones? They'd have a dominant position in the House now.
Yeah, it would have been a
just because it always worked that way before doesn't mean that's going to happen. And so Perry Bacon is saying, my thinking about Trump sharpened after I started reading a broader range of work. Okay. I learned a lot from scholars who specialize in sociology and history, and from writers who had studied governments and leaders abroad, and gained new insights from opinion writers on the left. And he cites James Bowie, for example. And on the right, David Frum and Peter Wehner, who also writes in the New York Times. And these are a lot of the people that I have in the pundit roundup.
Yes.
And why do you put these right-leaning people? Because they have interesting things to say. That's why. None of these people were overly reliant on traditional models for covering politics and trapped by those norms. And similarly, before the Trump era, I mostly relied on outlets like the Times, Washington Post, Politico, CNN, And the surprise is in part due to my media diet being dominated by establishment-oriented media outlets in which the ideological views expressed generally range from Hillary Clinton on the left to Jeb Bush on the right. And now I read the American Prospect and Fox News Twitter feed because I get a much broader view of what's going on in America.
Okay.
To summarize what he's saying.
I think I can
Number 3,
understand that.
don't be too reliant on political insiders. The wrong-headed reliance on GOP insiders culminated in what in hindsight was a huge media mistake, downplaying Trump's efforts to overturn the election results.
Yes.
Right? The president has no clear endgame to actually win the election, Washington Post wrote in a November 11th
true.
story. Asked about
You're
Trump's
right.
ultimate plan, one senior administration official chuckled and said, "You're giving everybody way too much credit. Trump insists he'll win, but aides say he has no real plan to overturn results." Well, that was wrong.
No.
Right? Politico
yeah.
did a lot of that stuff. And it wasn't just high-level Republicans in the media downplaying Trump's actions. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi spent much of the first half of 2019 predicting Democrats would not move to impeach Trump and implying Trump would not do anything that forced their hands. And you know how that turned out.
Yes, that too also wrong. Okay.
Right? Things changed. I mean, people couldn't believe that he would actually do this, even though everybody not in the establishment was telling them he is who he is and he will do this.
Yeah.
And so they learned the hard way. Right?
Okay.
Number 4,
True.
move on from both sidesism. I love that one because I hate both sidesism. You see it right now. You know, did you see what Ted Cruz did? Oh, yeah, what about Andrew Cuomo?
Yeah, right.
Cuomo's a jerk and people don't like him and they even get satirized together on Saturday Night Live. And the skit was, Cruz turning to Cuomo and saying, "Hey, see, we're both misunderstood." And Cuomo said, "Don't you even associate yourself with me.
Well,
I will put you in clown hospital so fast you won't even know it hit you."
different kind of error.
Cuomo is doing some bad thing. What did he do? He misreported stuff and then tried to cover it up. That's not the same thing as what Ted Cruz does, which is basically,
Try to do nothing,
lead
run
an
away.
insurrection, and when it failed, pretend it didn't happen. But when leadership is really called for, fleeing to Cancun.
Yeah. You're right. Like I said, different kind of error entirely. Okay.
Different kind of error entirely. Now, people are sort of aghast. Some people are aghast at the fact that Ted Cruz, who truly nobody likes.
Yes.
I mean, I can't help but, use that line over and over. There's two kinds of people. Those who hate
true.
Ted Cruz and Ted Cruz. But the title of my pundit roundup from today is, if you can't get Capone for murder, get him on tax evasion. Okay, people aren't flipping out about insurrection. You know why. You saw the USA Suffolk poll.
Yeah.
Trump supporters think it was Antifa, so why would you blame Ted Cruz? On the other hand, everybody blames him for fleeing Texas and going
That's
to Cancun.
good.
So if that's what you're going to be mad at him for, fine.
Yeah.
So long as everybody understands there's a really good reason to hate Ted Cruz. What difference does it make which reason you pick? Well, you're hating him, but for the wrong reason. Okay, I'm over it.
Okay. Yeah, very few defenders of the trip to Cancun. There were some, but very few.
Well, they faded, because all of his excuses went away and he had to apologize. And after Alexandria
Ocasio-Cortez.
Thank you.
Stumbling
Ocasio-Cortez,
right.
thank you for that cooperative overlap. After she raised $3 million and then went to distribute the money and goods in Texas, Ted Cruz actually was shamed by that, apologized, and then floated pictures of him handing out water to
Yes.
people.
He had to dump out all the water to float in it, though. So,
Right.
yeah, he's. What can I tell you? It's what a failure of imagination, honestly. But what could I do as a senator? What could I really be doing? And I mean, it doesn't even take an imagination. I mean, it's just, how about follow someone else's example? You don't have to wait for AOC. Right. Every other disaster ever.
Right. Number 5 in Perry Bacon's list
Not our point.
of 9 is read less access in insider journalism.
All right. Do we stop here then?
Right. Less Maggie Haberman and more people who actually understand what's going on inside the government. For example, Kellyanne Conway and Russell Vought. Which one's more famous?
Conway, obviously.
Right. And most people know who Conway is, and most people don't know who Russell Vought is. But as far as I can tell, Vought had far more influence on the actual policies because he served as the director of the Office of Management and Budget.
Yes.
Conway's a featured character. Nobody talked about OMB. And this insider access-based coverage, he says, was a hallmark of the Trump era. But as a reader of news and journalist trying to tell stories about policy and identity, these stories were often a distraction. They're full of unnamed sources, so it's hard to know how to interpret the information. Mm-hmm. And nobody was talking about what OMB is doing.
That's bad.
So that was a lesson he learned. I will not be reading many more stories or writing any about Mina Harris until it's clear to me she's playing some major role in the government's policies. She's Vice President Kamala Harris's niece. She's very active on social media. So what?
That's a good question all by itself.
Right. Number 6, embrace uncertainty. I was so certain Trump would not win the GOP nomination, in part because I had become taken with a political science book called The Party Decides. The book suggests that leaders in each party often steer voters towards some candidates in presidential nominating contests and away from others. And that's what Mitch McConnell did after the Todd Akin, Christine O'Donnell failures. Mm-hmm. Although, again, with the Trumpification of the state parties, he may not have that ability anymore.
Yeah, I mean, they could probably do with a codicil to their book. The party decides when no one else wants to.
Yeah.
You know, I mean.
Now, this is an important lesson, he says, for the next 5 years. The lesson, in my view, is not that we should ignore historical trends like those cited in The Party Decides or election forecasts like those at 538. Okay. After all, the Party Decides theory was basically right in 2020. Democratic elites embraced Biden over Sanders, and the party's voters followed.
Yes.
But I think what went wrong in 2015 was treating data and trends as a source of certainty.
Okay.
In other words, the party usually decides.
Yeah,
if
right.
you want to, summarize. Not always.
I think that's kind of what
just
we're
like,
the
out party generally gains seats in an off-year congressional election after in the first one after the presidency, except when they don't.
Yes. Right?
I
mean, that's an interesting one, too, because there are reasons for that happening. It's just that those reasons are typically present. If they're not present, then you might expect that it wouldn't happen. But no one learns the underlying dynamics of it. They just learn, the shorthand part.
Right. Or as we say in the polling business, you're just looking at the top lines without looking at the crosstabs.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Right. Sure. And other people will just refer to it as
nobody likes
the
Ted
nuance.
Cruz, but it turns out people have different reasons for not liking Ted Cruz.
Yeah,
right? There's
different things you might want to do about
some
that.
Some are more than others.
Sure, right. Not all of the answers of I don't like that guy is get rid of him. It's sometimes pile him up with work.
Right, but look, everybody hates Ted Cruz, so they must be holding him responsible for his role in the insurrection, right? Well, not according to the crosstabs. They hate him for going to Cancun. They don't really care whether or not he was an insurrectionist.
Yep. True. Right? All right.
So, rule number 7 thing that you have to learn. Learn more about identity issues.
Oh,
it's interesting coming from a black reporter who's well familiar with him, but he says even more so. Yes. He says, I didn't really think about as much white people having a racial identity and how that might shape their political views. But over the past few years, it's become clear that on some level, all politics is identity politics, which means I need to read a lot of history about how various identities have formed and read a lot of news about identities that are forming now, like QAnon followers.
No.
Like how they get a discount for Michael Bell's pillow.
That's the identity. I get cheap pillows for less.
Number 8. You'll like this.
Yeah.
Cover government.
All right.
The media critic Dan Fruitkin says reporters on beats like the White House and Congress should think of themselves as covering government, not politics. That seems right to me. Covering government means we should be scrutinizing and evaluating how Biden's immigration policies work, not whether or not it's going to be win-lose. If you have a hammer, everything's a nail, says O'Brien. I'm not sure who O'Brien is. What White House and political reporters like to do is the horse race, who's winning, who's coming across the strong, but they don't talk about the policies.
Yeah.
Now, I'm a policy guy. The only reason I do politics is you can't have policy without politics. So you got to understand the politics to understand whether or not you're going to get the policy. So don't tell me that relieving student debt is the best thing and Biden should just do it. It's never that simple. He didn't run on doing that. He ran on not doing that. He won. That's number 1. Number 2, white non-college American voters are moving to the Republican Party.
Yes.
And if you have to craft a policy you have to look at the political ramifications. It's insane not to. It's malpractice not to.
Sure.
So that doesn't mean that the policy you want, which may be the best policy, you're going to get.
Yeah. That could be it.
And you won't understand that if you just cover government or if you just cover politics. You have to do both. But you can't just cover politics, and that's what folks have been doing, and that's bad. So he says, I learned a lot, but he still have a lot to learn, and that's okay. But that leads him to his 9th thing.
It does? Okay.
Yeah. Stay humble.
Oh.
Because you're going to get it wrong. It's okay.
I was
Just
wondering
keep
what the
doing
9th one was. Okay. Yeah, because I got 9 lessons, and then I just saw the big bold 8, and then where's 9? But I guess it's very humble. It doesn't have a big bold 9. It's a very humble 9. It's hidden.
Right.
Okay. That makes some sense.
So I thought that was just a wonderful piece because it not only outlines some of the issues are in coverage, but it also acknowledges that the reporter himself, has some mea culpas about what he got wrong. And, I've been watching Twitter, Politics Reporter Twitter, noting that in many cases, the political reporters know this, and they're actually making these adjustments. Not completely, not 100%,
sure.
But they're making those adjustments, but they won't admit that they got anything wrong the first time. Like Perry Bacon will say, I got this wrong. These are the lessons I learned.
That was helpful.
And the other people will say, well, we're just doing it differently. Well, what about the fact that you did it wrong up until now over the last 4 years? Like Dana Bash saying, this is the pivot where Trump finally became president. Did you ever hear her say, I got that wrong. I really shouldn't have said that?
No, I have
never.
not.
And you never will. In fact, I asked her. She blocked me.
Now you really won't hear it. Even if she decides you're right and it's time to, well, that would be a pivot for her. That would be funny. When she does it, we can say, hey, look who pivoted.
Well, you'll have to tell me because I wouldn't know. She's blocked me on Twitter.
All right. Yeah. Well, if I ever find out, I'll let you know.
All right. So last piece in the series of things we should learn, and this is about vaccines. And this is just a fascinating thread by a black physician who's having a conversation with like a normal person.
Okay.
And she gives it the hashtag, what's your why? And so she is speaking to somebody, I guess at a restaurant.
Yeah.
And it's the restaurant owner.
All right.
And she asks about the vaccine. And he, in this particular telling, will be labeled you.
Oh, all right.
And she, the black doctor asking about this, is going to be me. And that's the perspective.
Okay.
You say, it's a no for me, dog. And that's what you say when I asked your thoughts on getting a COVID vaccine. We both laughed, but the way you paused and returned to your industrious task of clearing crumbs from the table made me know you weren't joking. So I lifted my laptop on cue as your hand swept under it quickly and collected the crusty bread remnants into your other cupped hand. This is cleaning the table. He owns the place. Me, you sound serious, are you? And he shrugs and says, you shrug and say, serious enough.
Okay.
So I nod slowly and I tighten the drawstring on my hoodie. It's a cold day for outdoor dining, especially solo nerdy type, but seeing newly arranged and spaced tables thrust along the sides of some of my favorite Atlanta eateries made me happy and willing to brave the chill for a slice of normalcy. And I was glad to see you. And you said, well, it's mad cold out here. And I said, well, you're the one that set up the tables. And he laughed and he said, that's truth. Plus, you got this heater lamp thingy, so I'm good. And you, pouring water, well, if you like it, I love it. It's good to see you back. And I say, so, I mean, since you don't have 10 other customers at the moment, can I ask you why it's a no for you on the vaccine? You pause for a moment and place the picture on the table. And you say, well, it seems like everybody's trying too hard, and it's much too much. Me, well, say what? Well, you fold your arms and sift your mind for the right words. Like, if I'm honest, I feel like I'm in the middle of a tug-of-war. Like, one side is trying hard as hell to get black folks to get this vaccine, but then if you're black, you also got the other side going just as hard to get you not to take it.
Oh.
And what's crazy is that both sides feel hella strong about their position. So I'm like, damn, can everybody just chill out so I can think? And I realize I've mostly been insulated from the other side of that pendulum, even though I'm black too. So I say, wow. And you say, wow, what? And I say, like, wow, I hadn't thought of it that way. I think as a doctor, I didn't realize just how much comes from both sides. And you shaking your head. Yeah, if you get one more video telling me about how bad this vaccine is, I'm going to lose it.
Oh, no.
And then I got this doctor lady sitting in my section outside in the cold coming at me too. And I say,
yeah,
but
'cause she's
I
right.
didn't come at you. I just asked. And you, yeah, right. That ask was the setup. Me, well, that's fair. And you look around to see if there was more you needed to do. It was mid-afternoon, so it was quiet. And you say, but I say that there's like urgency to it, you know? And you say, but is there for people like me? Y'all go through this trouble to get folks to say yes, but you got no vaccine when they're ready. It's like walking somebody to the edge of the high dive and expecting them to wait on the edge until you finish filling the pool.
Oh, okay.
Me, well, that's real talk, and you, damn right. Me, so can I ask you two questions? So what's the way to approach this? Like from the want you to get vaccinated side. And you pointing back and forth, well, you know, have talks like this. Talking with no pressure and realizing you're not the only one in my ear that believes what they're saying is in my best interest.
Okay.
So how do I counter the other stuff you're hearing? Well, by not acting like it's beneath you to talk about other views. On either side, folks need to listen and not act like the words are gospel. Like, let me listen and think. The heavy hand approach, that ain't it. And for a lot of folks, you can ease up and chat since we do have time to fill a pool with water. Yeah, exactly. There's no rush. I can't get it anyway.
True.
So you're saying we got to have the pool right by you when you do feel ready. And you, well, it's posted over the river and through 5 websites and across town. Yeah.
Yes. That would be helpful.
So you gave me a lot to think about. And the doc says, that's good. And the guy says, well, did you add it to my tip?
All right. Well, you should
But
absolutely
good talk,
do that.
real talk. Very good that was posted. Vaccine hesitancy is built on a lot of different things, and not all of it is crazy talk.
right.
So take care. Thanks for listening. Those
Yes.
are the lessons learned. Sorry to interrupt you, except not
problem.
sorry. And I'll be back on Wednesday to interrupt you again.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We've had some an unusual failure of soundboard. Usually when I start things up in the morning, the first couple attempts at starting soundboard up fail, and I have to redo it. But then once it gets started, I've never had it fail in the middle of a show before. But, well, this time it did. And in the middle of a break at that. So our usual music bringing us back in from the break is gone, and that's odd. And I don't know. Maybe we'll see if I can edit it into the podcast, in which case this part of the discussion will make no sense to you whatsoever if we're successful. But at least it will have been explained at that point. Okay. Lots to catch up on. More ahead here, and some breaking news. I might as well use the awkwardness of coming in without any music to give you the breaking news that broke during the latter half of Greg's segment. What do we got here? Robert Barnes, among the many, reporting that the Supreme Court, without any comment whatsoever, denies Trump's request to keep his tax records from the Manhattan District Attorney. We let you know, I think, just before the weekend, that they were gearing up for kicking their investigation into, or up to the next level. I guess I was going to say into the next gear, but I already used gear in that sentence, so I quickly steered around it. But, yeah, I guess that'll be the end of his appeals on that, since there's no appeal from the Supreme Court. But as with everything, he appealed everything as far as he could, and now it'll just be whatever other obstruction game he can come up with. Perhaps at this point, I mean, there's more obstruction available to him. You have in your hand now the denial by the Supreme Court of his appeal, presumably of a circuit court ruling, which I don't know whether they had to reverse any district courts or anything like that, but they must have handed up to the Supreme Court the ruling that no, Trump cannot withhold his tax records from the Manhattan District Attorney for whatever reason it was that he was claiming that he ought to be allowed to do so, and must turn them over. He said, well, I'll show you. I'll take it to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said, no, you won't. That should leave us in the position of the district court being able to say, okay, so our ruling now stands, and our ruling was that the federal district court either, I forget what their initial ruling was. If they ruled that you had to turn over your records, then it's true, you do, and that's it. If they had, for whatever reason, ruled that you didn't have to turn over your records, but we ruled that they were wrong and you did, then that's true. Either way, what turns out to be true is that he's got to turn over his records. But so now what happens? We say things like, well, now he's got to turn over his records. And what does that mean physically? And it may mean that Donald Trump says, or through his attorney says, I acknowledge that what the Supreme Court has said about its unwillingness to overrule the circuit courts. I acknowledge what the circuit courts have said about what they think ought to be the ruling from the district court. Now the district court, I guess, gets kicked all the way back down, and the district court can now issue those orders for those, or uphold the subpoenas of the Manhattan District Attorney for those records. Does that mean that he will get those records today, tomorrow, next week, 2 months from now? Not necessarily. It means that there's a court that will be upset if he doesn't turn it over. And depending on how upset, you may find that the court issues some contempt citations. Does somebody go to jail? They could. Could it be a fine? It could be. Could it be that Trump hires some more lawyers to come up with some other reasons that they haven't tested yet as to why they shouldn't have to turn over the records to the Manhattan DA and then begin the whole process anew on that? It certainly could. We'll see how far he wants to push it, how much money he wants to spend on the litigation, or whether he comes to the conclusion that for my supporters, it doesn't matter at all what they learn about me and about my taxes. I can make an excuse for anything and they'll follow me anywhere. And so therefore he will turn over his tax records. Or the secret's out now. Most people know everything that they need to know about what a tax cheat I am, thanks to earlier investigative reports from the New York Times. So we'll just confirm that they're right several years after they make their splash and hope that it makes less of a splash this time. And I'm not president now, so it's okay. And I don't know. I don't know what decision he'll make, but once again, I remind you that winning in court is not the same thing as getting what you sued for necessarily, or at least not right away. And it sometimes requires a lot more litigation to get that, and sometimes you still don't get it because the other party says, no, I'd rather pay the price of fines or prison time than give you that thing you're asking for. And sometimes it's fine to simply say, all right, well, we'll put you in prison. Except that's not ordinarily the sort of thing that you will see a federal district court do to a former president. And even if they did do that, what do you do then? I mean, there would certainly be people that set themselves up as shields in front of him. You might, find that the lawyer says, well, my client is indifferent about it, but I won't turn over the records, and deflect the blame onto me, and then they go to jail. And if it's an ex-president, it might just be, look, we just, can't do that. Or we can do that, and you're going to jail, but then who goes? Federal marshals go to arrest him and confront the Secret Service protective detail. Who knows? I mean, the guy sponsored, an insurrection in which they attacked the Capitol of the United States. So I guess, I don't know, maybe we'll take some of the 9 lessons that we were discussing before and realize we don't know what the hell this guy's going to do about this stuff. In a normal world, he just lost, and you would see those records in the hands of the Manhattan District Attorney fairly soon. But, we'll see. I mean, I don't think he has the stomach to fight and go to jail or see who prevails in a fight between Secret Service and federal marshals. I don't know if he knows for sure that he wins that. I don't know. I guess I'm just saying it could be a while before we actually know what happens and we actually get a hold of these things. All right. Let's see. Other things to do here and to catch up on. Oh, I've got some other distractions happening at the same time, but we'll just try and keep one eye on Twitter and figure this stuff out. Back to earlier discussions as far as Trumpism and taking over the party with Trumpism. Mad Hatter noting that the Trumpism level of support in the GOP battle will take place in Texas if Governor Abbott ends up getting challenged by Alan West, who's the statewide party chair there and is about as Trumpy and crazy as they get. Ordinarily, you would think, I'm sure Greg Abbott thinks that he's well insulated against challenge because he's been pretty Trumpy too. And one of the Trumpiest governors around. But without the responsibility of governing and already being crazy, Alan West had lots of room to play in that field and might just be able to displace him as the Trumpier of the two. Events on the ground, he says, are changing quickly, so we'll keep an eye on that, and we'll see whether that turns into a prescient call in the future, and we can pit him against the rest of the punditry who say, no, that's outrageous. An incumbent governor, never. That would never work against. I don't know if anybody's saying that. And maybe if they're reading Perry Bacon's advice, they won't. And that will probably be a good thing. Okay, so let's see. What else have we got? Here's CNN's alert to us, sent to us by Bill, that on the Supreme Court case, the way they put it, because, it's strident here. Former President Donald Trump is dealt a massive loss as the Supreme Court clears the way for New York prosecutor to obtain his tax returns. They're clearing the way. It's just not the same thing as getting those tax returns. And it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. It will actually be interesting to see even if he just plays it the way normal people do. That would be a development. You win, here they are. That by itself would be a significant story. All right, let's see. What other things do we have to share here? These I mentioned already. There's an awful lot. You know what? Here on a non-governmental political front, I think it's probably worth mentioning at this point. I've grabbed an AP report being carried by ABC News to mark the occasion. Boy Scouts celebrate the first group of female Eagle Scouts this year. That's true. So they're inducting their first, or recognizing their first Eagle Scouts since accepting girls into the ranks, including one or two who apparently earned every single merit badge there is to earn, which is pretty amazing. Occasionally you see kids really go to town on that stuff and get interested, and it's a fun way of learning things. And apparently during the pandemic lockdowns, at least one of these new Eagle Scouts said, that made it, gave me a unique opportunity to turn to the merit badges and occupy my time that way and learn an awful lot along the way. So lots of congratulations to the many new girl Eagle Scouts. Exciting times. So I'll include this letter for you to learn a little bit about several of them who made themselves available for these interviews for this historic occasion. Just thought I would bring that up. Let's see. Perhaps under discussion tomorrow, but we'll put it out there. What's happening in Congress with coronavirus relief plans? As you know, that was, obviously everybody's got their eyes on that as a major topic, but it took on new importance toward the end of the impeachment trial, when the question of whether or not the House managers would push for opening up the trial to witnesses was a good strategic decision, both in terms of the trial itself and in terms of the longer term goals, which should really be short-term goals, of the pursuit of the greater Biden agenda and coronavirus relief in particular. And of course, there was a lot of rationalization of the decision to back away from the requests for witnesses, both my own theory as to why they did that, which might have been that they never wanted witnesses in the first place, and the theories of others who theorized that perhaps they would have liked to have had at least some witnesses, but they wanted to get the trial over with quickly so that it wasn't standing in the way of the rest of the Biden agenda, including this coronavirus relief. And although we had given many times, offered up the advice of how to conduct a lengthier trial with a different aim of establishing more of a record for history about what happened, as opposed to doing that by either an independent commission or the study of a special committee in Congress or some combination of the two, doing it in the impeachment trial setting, which, made a certain amount of sense. And of course, we didn't discuss it at the time, but we probably should have. I will remind you of all the work that Armando did during the first impeachment trial to inform you about the particularly robust subpoena powers that an impeachment inquiry would have attached to it. And that might become very useful in discovering information that might otherwise be the subject of lengthy litigation. I mean, it would still be lengthy litigation even in the impeachment setting, but it'll be lengthier possibly outside of the impeachment context. When they get around to that investigation, you might find, depending on the design of the committee and what sorts of statutory power it's granted on subpoenas. And I guess they should pay a great deal of attention to that in outlining the powers of such a commission so that they don't find themselves wishing that they were still in an impeachment setting so that they could lean on the extraordinary investigatory powers that the Supreme Court traditionally, we'll see whether the current makeup of the court honors that position in the future, or would honor that position if there was another impeachment going on. So I don't know. I guess we'll leave that out there and say, always remember, you can impeach people even once they're out of office, and we've established that. It would be interesting to see if there was a third impeachment of Donald Trump just to be able to invoke the additional investigatory power that an impeachment brings with it. But I think they can work around it, especially if they establish a new commission and they can set out statutory rules for it and just say, essentially just declare in other terms, but essentially just declare, okay, they shall have, subpoena powers equivalent to, from the judicial point of view, equivalent to that of an impeachment inquiry. I assume the language would be fancier, but certainly something they can arrange. Anyway, so for all of that, what we learned in seeing Democrats turn away from the idea of a lengthier trial, there was a lot of discussion of, we need to get back to coronavirus relief. The answer back to that, of course, was yes, but there's a scheduled recess. And although we won't necessarily spend any time arguing over whether or not that means vacation versus actually doing something, because that discussion's already been had. For Ted Cruz, it meant vacation. For Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, it meant actually doing something. But more than that, we also observed on Friday that I forget which one it was, the House Environmental Natural Resources Committee coming together to do their organizing, and I think probably lots of committees did. And other committees probably came back together to do substantive work on coronavirus relief. They just did it remotely, as we observed Lauren Boebert doing that with the performative display of a pile of guns behind her. And she kept on yammering about this all weekend, by the way. Anyway, so there was some substantive work being done, even though they were on recess, and a lot of work being done on the stimulus plan. But the fact is that they weren't going to be present to vote on it, pass it, get it done, and get us to the point where they were cutting checks. So, it was a little bit disingenuous to say, we need to wrap this trial up now so that we can get to those checks, which everyone wants. Because those checks weren't going to be written this past week, and indeed they were not. So when will they be written? That's what I've got here. Bloomberg, giving us their predictions for how things will run and how quickly they'll move. Biden's $1.9 trillion stimulus plan enters 3-week Congress dash. Eric, I don't know how he pronounces his last name. Is he Wasson or Wason, like the Virginia Center that we learned about being pronounced differently, and Laura Davison, both together on this piece here. Let's see. Democrats begin the final push for President Joe Biden's $1.9 trillion stimulus bill this week, I guess as they return to work, dropping any pretense of bipartisanship, interestingly, to quickly pass the package before an earlier round of benefits runs out. And I saw a couple early tweeters on this thing taking exception with that, and I can understand why. Dropping any pretense of bipartisanship. I mean, it wasn't a pretense that they actually were hoping, for some people anyway, hoping to get some bipartisanship, but it was also pretty clear from the beginning with their intent to use the reconciliation process that they understood that bipartisanship wouldn't be forthcoming from the other side. I mean, the pretense of bipartisanship is really from Republicans. The idea that they really were going to offer some legitimate attempt at bipartisanship was the nonsense. Anyway, once again, blaming it all on Democrats. But having dismissed that, we'll move on to see what else they have to say here. This will be the first real test for Democrats' full control of government since former President Donald Trump's impeachment trial, with implications for the rest of Biden's agenda and the pandemic-battered economy. The House plans to vote as soon as Friday on Democrats' stimulus package, setting up a Senate vote as soon as next week. Resolving the final hurdles, especially disagreement among Senate Democrats about a provision phasing in a $15 per hour federal minimum wage, would clear the way for Biden to give his first address to a joint session of Congress in March, outlining his next policy goals, including a multi-trillion-dollar infrastructure bill. So I guess that's what the race, how did they put it, the 3-week dash is, up to the non-State of the Union address. You remember that I've told you in the past that a new president's first address to a joint session isn't considered a State of the Union address, because I don't know why, but I guess they don't know the State of the Union yet. So it's just sort of generally, hi, how you doing, even if the guy's been in government for 40 years and does know what the State of the Union is. But okay, that's protocol. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I would necessarily agree that that's some sort of even soft deadline for anything, but it would be nice if all of this was taken care of before then, because there'll be a lot of people shouting at their televisions at home watching the non-State of the Union State of the Union if those checks aren't a done deal. If not cut and mailed, then at least the legislation should be passed, which I imagine means that a short-term Republican goal will be to prevent that legislation from passing for as long as possible, and if possible at all, drag it into the non-State of the Union State of the Union, even if they realize that they'll eventually lose on this thing. Okay, so resolving final hurdles, especially disagreement among Senate Democrats about the $15 an hour federal minimum wage, definitely an issue. Something they also have to settle with the parliamentarian. Lots of discussion of that over the weekend. Bernie Sanders seems bound and determined to win the argument. And he's got an ally in this in Chuck Schumer. At least it appears to be the case that they both are on the same page, making arguments with the Senate parliamentarian for why it should be considered in order under the Byrd rules to include a federal minimum wage in a reconciliation bill. And we discussed why those are, certain arguments that might actually work for that. And if you took a broader, more holistic economic view of things, it might be something you could become convinced of. But if you take a lawyerly proximate cause approach to things, it might be something you would resist. But also, of course, there's the political argument, which may encompass such constituent parts, I guess we could say, as telling the parliamentarian that they could get another parliamentarian even though she's greatly respected, and that they understand why she's taking this position. It's not a political decision that we are replacing you because you don't favor Democrats with your rulings. But you could, make the case, well, we just don't think that your consideration of the relevant factors is broad enough. Too lawyerly an approach, not holistic enough an approach. And though you've served ably and loyally and all of this, and we understand and agree on narrow grounds with your position, we disagree on broader grounds, and it's time to have a broader thinking person as parliamentarian. And that position being spelled out might be enough either way. Either, okay, well, they'll get another parliamentarian who will see things this way, or the current parliamentarian will say, perhaps I could be persuaded to take a broader, more holistic, economically colored view of relevancy under the Byrd Rule. And hey, could be one of the 9 lessons that Perry Bacon recommended being implemented there in the Senate Parliamentarian's office. Anyway, Sanders appears quite firm in his belief that they will win that fight, but I'm still not so sure. We have to wait and see, and it'll be very interesting to see how they settle it. The Senate, Bloomberg continues, is on track to send a robust $1.9 trillion package to the president's desk before the March 14th expiration. That is the 3-week deadline. Now I see what they're talking about. The March 14th expiration of unemployment insurance benefits from the last round of stimulus. They don't want that to end and have to restart. It causes all sorts of problems, not the least of which is disruption in payments that people are depending on. Okay, so they want it on his desk before the March 14th expiration of unemployment insurance benefits from the last round of stimulus, according to Chuck Schumer in a Friday letter to colleagues. We will meet this deadline, he says. So, okay, now you know what Republicans are aiming at, pushing it past March 14th so that there are problems for the American people. Because if their view of this is, if there are problems for American people and they are upset and angry, they'll look for someone to blame, and we hope that will be Democrats, and very often that's the case. In public, the focus will be on the House this week, with a Budget Committee vote Monday, today, and a floor vote on the bill as soon as Friday. You see how slowly things move anyway. Vote today, but maybe as soon as Friday for this bill. But then again, maybe next Monday. The content of the 591-page bill is mostly locked in. The Budget Committee isn't even allowed to make substantive changes when it meets at 1 p.m., and there's no sign of a rebellion by the few remaining Democratic deficit hawks imperiling the bill on the floor. Does everybody get what they mean? That the Budget Committee, they'll meet on it, and they're a necessary step to moving the bill forward, but they can't make substantive changes. Why? It's a reconciliation bill. The role of the Budget Committee in reconciliation is to design the instructions that go into the budget resolution, send the instructions to other committees that have the jurisdiction to make the spending changes directed. Those committees make those changes. That's all sent back to the Budget Committee, not with the understanding that they'll then tinker with it, but rather that they will then assemble all of the work of the other committees into one reconciliation bill at a time. Anyway, there can be more. We explained at some point why there could be more than just one. But in this case, to create that omnibus bill out of the whatever number of other bills that they got back from other committees to comply with reconciliation instructions. But they won't make any further changes. They'll just consolidate it into one package, send that to the Rules Committee. The Rules Committee then sets the rules for debate. They're pretty hard and fast and fixed statutorily anyway. So I guess technically they might not even need it, but it's probably best if they handle things that way, especially if they need any waivers of the rules, and then on to the House floor. Okay, the real reaction will be behind closed doors in the Senate, where Democratic leaders are hammering out the changes needed to get all 50 Senate Democrats and independents on board. That, of course, the big challenge for them. The $15 minimum wage, easy to include in the House. The House has no Byrd rule, And to the extent that there are rules that might argue against including a provision like the minimum wage hike in a reconciliation bill, they can be waived by a rule. That's why you would send the Budget Committee's compilation of the other committee's work to the Rules Committee so that they could say, we'll adopt a rule for the bill that, for instance, waives all points of order, or at least these specific points of order against the bill. And then once the rule is adopted by majority vote in the House, those points of order, which might otherwise require more votes to waive, get through. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning. I have good news to report. Many more listeners like you are making critical contributions that keep our show on the air. Makes good sense, of course, and patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple. Now you can make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for helping keep you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Just before the break, I was trying to hurry everything in before the break, and so I guess we slightly misstated things. I did. I'm going to spread the blame around. You, by listening to me misstate this thing, it's your fault. No, what I meant to say, though, just a slight misstatement. All the mechanics are the same. But what I meant to say was that by issuing a rule that waives points of order against the reconciliation bill, all the points of order that might otherwise be raised against it, which might require greater than a majority, although it's not usually the case in the House. But I don't even know. How about this? I don't even know exactly what the rule is in terms of how many votes are necessary to waive points of order against a reconciliation bill in the House. It may be the case that because it's statutory and all of these rules come from the Budget Act, there may in fact be higher thresholds necessary to waive points of order in the House. But because the House has the unique ability to waive points of order against the bill in the rules for the consideration of the bill, as a practical matter, all supermajority requirements get wiped out anyways. They may have known exactly what they were facing in drafting the Budget Act and just never imposed those supermajority requirements on the House at all, but just reserved them for the Senate where those things can really work. But I don't know. Now offhand, I can't even tell you what it is because it gets waived all the time. That's all you have to do. You write a rule that says, upon the adoption of this rule, it shall be in order to consider the bill, HR, whatever it is, the Omnibus Reconciliation Bill. Omnibus or not, it doesn't matter. Reconciliation Bill. And further, all points of order or this specific point of order, whatever it may be, are waived against the bill. And once you adopt the rule that says those points of order are waived, then they can't be made. And how do you adopt a rule in the House? By majority vote. So even if the original design of the Budget Act contemplated supermajorities in both houses, the House was eventually going to wipe those things off the map. They don't always, and sometimes deals are worked out where you say, all right, so-and-so has a suggestion that we add this controversial provision, but we're not going to give it the protection of the leadership and the Rules Committee. And we're going to say, if you can convince a supermajority of the House, if that even exists as a requirement, that your rule should be, that your provision should have the rule against it waived, then fine. But we're not going to offer you that protection. But more often it would come up in the setting of somebody bringing up something at the last minute and either attempting to offer an amendment to the bill if the rule also didn't close off all amendments. But you get, I don't know what to tell you. I think you get the idea. It's clear to me. So if you don't get it, call me and I'll explain it to you. But I'll probably do it in these terms. And so we'll spend 15 minutes with you, going, I don't know what you're talking about. And then I'll hit on the right formula for explaining to you why it works. But I think the basic thing you need to know is that, yes, the House has the neat trick of being able to use the Rules Committee to waive any things that will cause trouble for them at any point. So they use it. Anyway, as they were saying, the real action will be behind closed doors in the Senate, where they have other problems. Not only do they have supermajority requirements occasionally to waive rules, they've actually constructed a way around it if necessary. I don't know whether they're going to get all the votes that they need to do it, but a way around objections to the inclusion of, for instance, the minimum wage hike in the reconciliation bill. But yeah, first things first, they have to make sure that their way around, their workaround will work when push comes to shove. Will all 50 of you who say you will ordinarily vote with Democrats in the Senate be there on this provision? We know, for instance, that Joe Manchin has given mixed signals on the minimum wage. Apparently, he's in favor of seeing it rise, but not necessarily to $15 an hour. But then Bernie Sanders, budget chairman, has countered by saying, well, it doesn't rise to $15 an hour this year. It phases in over a series of years. And is that enough to assuage your issues with it? I usually say guilt with it, but not necessarily always the case that that's what you're assuaging. But anyway, will it work with Manchin? We have yet to see. Will it work with Sinema? I don't know. Nobody knows. I don't know whether she's opposed to the minimum wage thing or not. Nobody knows what's going on with her. All right, let's see. So key provisions of the plan you probably are already familiar with, but they run them down here in bullet format, so let's do it. $422 billion for stimulus checks to individuals, $246 billion for supplemental unemployment insurance, $350 billion for state and local governments. They need that. $160 billion to combat the virus, including vaccines, testing, and tracing. $130 billion to reopen schools, whatever that might be for, various technical fixes that need doing there. $7.25 billion for small businesses via Paycheck Protection Program. So, pretty all-around package. I don't think any surprises in that one. Looks like they hit all the high points. Guess the question is that enough money? And I don't know. I wouldn't be able to answer that question for you. But that's the package. Biden initially sought some Republican support for his stimulus proposal, which includes $1,400 checks for individuals making less than $75,000. I guess that's where that controversy comes down. Resources for vaccine distribution, funds for schools to reopen, and $400 per week in supplemental unemployment insurance. But Republicans said the plan was too expensive, not too weak, but too strong, coming after last year's $2 trillion and $900 billion virus relief packages enacted in March and late December, respectively. Well, that's wrong, but that's the position they're taking. Biden on Friday called on Congress to pass his plan during a tour of a Michigan Pfizer plant that's producing the vaccine. He called on Republicans in Congress to listen to their constituents and vote for the bill, citing polls saying a majority of Americans support the measure. True. Critics say my plan is too big, Biden told supporters. Let me ask them, what would they have me cut? What would they have me leave out? Should we not invest $20 billion to vaccinate the nation? But most Republicans are expected to oppose the bill, with House Minority Whip Steve Scalise telling the GOP conference to vote against it. Speaking on Sunday on ABC's This Week, where he really had no business appearing, and they should really get on this ball with deciding whether or not they're going to talk to insurrectionists and big liars, specifically liars who pass on the big lie. I mean, he's also a big liar for many other reasons, but yeah, if you're involved in the big lie, there's no reason for you to get airtime. That's it. They really need to draw the line at some point. But they haven't yet. So speaking on ABC's This Week On Sunday, Scalise said it makes no sense to pass the large package Biden has offered when there are unspent funds from the last relief bill and growing concerns about the nation's debt. Now, the growing concerns about the nation's debt is the usual claptrap from Republicans who don't care about it when there's a Republican president in office, and you should really just have a giant 10-ton weight dropped on you on air when you bring that up. And yeah, there are probably unspent funds from the last relief bill. Spend them, and then spend this too. Anyway, he goes on to blah, blah, let's say the money is still sitting in a bank account. We're going to spend $1.9 trillion of additional spending to bail out failed states. That's their favorite line. Oh, if you need help, it's because you're a failed state. Well, your state needs help, and you're a failed state. And it's, I don't know why he thinks that. But they continue with the myth that only the blue states are having problems with COVID, even though the worst problems are in red states. They just don't care, I guess, is the difference. But, people there are in trouble and dying, and we care about those things. And once again, it falls to Democrats to actually try and take care of people. All right. And yeah, the money is still sitting in a bank account, and I know, blah, 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 unspent funds, which I guess you might also answer by saying, well, if the basic fact is that sometimes we appropriate and authorize and appropriate these funds and sometimes they don't get spent, then what are you worried about with the $1.9 trillion package? Some of that also won't get spent. And if that ends up being the case and we don't need it, then unspend it, rescind it. And then you can celebrate having done something for the nation's debt. But I bet we'll, A, need it all, and B, you'll only want to spend it on the wall anyway. So it's a pretty lame excuse, and there was zero pushback on it from the host. So guess what? Don't bother going back and looking at the video. They just say, thanks, we'll have to end it there. All right. So let's see. What else? We're going to spend $1.9 trillion of additional spending to bail out failed states, to raise the minimum wage. What does that have to do with COVID? It should be focused on helping families and small businesses who are struggling, not bankrupting our children, Scalise said. But of course, the minimum wage doesn't bankrupt our children, and it does help families and small businesses who are struggling. But screw all of that. Let's see. Democrats have said they didn't have time to negotiate with Republicans. The current federal unemployment supplement of $300 per week expires March 14th, though some jobless individuals will continue to receive benefits until April 11th. Missing this deadline would cut off assistance for more than 10 million people, and that's not a good place to start. All right. With that in mind, Democrats are using a fast-track budget procedure to enact the bill without needing at least 10 Republicans. That's reconciliation, of course. That means the bill must comply with instructions in the recently adopted fiscal 2021 budget resolution. Easy enough. And the total cost can't exceed the $1.9 trillion. Easy enough. And all provisions must be fiscal in nature. That's where the problem arises. The Congressional Budget Office also said on Saturday that the bill slightly exceeds $1.9 trillion, which will force House Democrats to make trims before the bill can pass the Senate. Difficult, but doable. The main provision that might not be eligible is the $15 minimum wage. Senate Budget Chairman Bernie Sanders argues that the measure qualifies as fiscal since the nonpartisan CBO found it to increase deficits by $54 billion over 10 years. That's, doesn't sound like a good thing, but it would qualify it as fiscal, I guess, under his argument. I think there are better arguments for this. Opponents say the budget impact is merely incidental compared to the overall labor market impact. The wage provision may also violate Senate rules against adding to deficits after 10 years and therefore would require offsetting savings or revenue to qualify. And I think probably a more holistic economic approach to what the impact of higher income is on revenues might be in order here. All right, well, let's see. Back on to this next section, rules decision. Senate parliamentarian Elizabeth McDonough will hear arguments by lawyers for the Democratic majority and Republican minority before ruling. Should be some economists in there too. I hope there are. Although a simple Senate majority can overrule her decision, West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin has said he won't vote against her recommendation, denying the 50 votes that Democrats would need with Vice President Kamala Harris's tie-breaking vote. Once the parliamentarian sets the parameters of what could be allowed in the bill, it'll be up to Democrats to decide what provisions to include in the Senate version. Democratic Senators Manchin, Sinema, and John Tester of Montana have all expressed doubts about the minimum wage increase. Manchin has also tried to lower the $75,000 threshold for phasing out the $1,400 stimulus checks, but he faced oppositions from progressives and from the Biden administration. Meanwhile, Senate Finance Committee Chairman Ron Wyden has said he wants to extend expanded unemployment benefits for 6 months rather than the 5 months in the House bill, and would like the $400 per week supplemental unemployment insurance to instead be $600. Democrats plan to skip formal committee work on the bill, which means their internal talks may produce a substitute amendment for a vote on the Senate floor. Once the Senate approves the changes, the House plans to vote again on the bill before the March 14th deadline. And I think there you see another wrinkle developing. It would not be unusual, but it would be less than desirable under these circumstances with a deadline that they've imposed on themselves, but it's a good deadline to impose. Now looming, you could very well see the House pass a version of the bill. And by the way, you'll probably see certain provisions of the bill, some things added and some things jettisoned from the bill that will be unpopular, particularly with progressives, with the excuse being that only without this provision, or only with some new provision, maybe something cutting some additional funds, will our bill be able to pass the Senate. But it may end up being the case that the Senate will offer its own substitute anyway, and so the bill will end up right back in the House for discussion there and have to pass all over again. So anyway, all of this, to bring it back to the beginning of our discussion on this thing, brings us to the point where the idea of, say, truncating the proceedings in the impeachment in order to get out of the way for a quick turnaround on relief checks, still not really gonna happen that way. And when people said that the decision against including witnesses was about speeding up those checks, I said, all right, well, start the clock, because it's not coming next week, and it's probably not coming after that. And I think this thing will ping pong back and forth between the House and the Senate once or twice. It could be a long time before you see those checks cut, but it would have been rather demoralizing to announce that at that time. All right, let's see. A couple other things that I wanted to squeeze in here for your consideration. Let's see. I'm going to check on a few of these here. There's some new news here about how we could see new information from the New York Times in their reporting on the attempt to lay blame somehow for the January 6th insurrection on Nancy Pelosi, the old what did she know and when did she know it play, claiming that she did something by way of forcing the Capitol Police to stand down in their preparations for the demonstrations of the 6th. And now it turns out Kyle Cheney tweets and links to a New York Times piece about it. The New York Times reconstruction of the January 6th security response suggests that Pelosi and McConnell were, in fact, on the same page regarding security, and I don't think that there was really ever any chance that they were not. It was just being left out of the formulation provided by Republicans. It was stupid to say, well, if there was any problem with security, it was because Nancy Pelosi did something, because Mitch McConnell was there, and they confer on these things. So the only real plausible conclusion here was that they were on the same page, despite some belated Republican efforts to, of course, cast blame at her for the delay in guard deployment, for instance. And he has a screen grab from it, but it comes from a New York Times piece that I'll probably consider later on in the week. The Lost Hours, How Confusion and Inaction at the Capitol Delayed a Troop Deployment. All right, let's see. Other things I wanted to bring to your attention. Weird stories from the weekend. I guess here's the weirdest one. The BBC reporting on this, and this one forwarded to me via Twitter over the weekend. Let's let's see, and I think it might have been Rebecca Romans forwarding this one on, but I'm not entirely sure. But there were a lot of you who saw this one. But get this, according to the BBC, news we missed at the time, I guess, how Trump, we're back on him, how Trump offered Kim, that is North Korea's Kim Jong-un, offered Kim a ride on Air Force One. Wow, that's a bad idea. And honestly, I can't believe that actually happened. And I'm sure the story appears to be clear that this astonished and worried, and properly so, everyone at the time. President Trump's meetings with Kim Jong-un were among the most eye-catching moments of his presidency. The piece begins. In the third and final episode of a new BBC series, Trump Takes on the World, directed by Tim Sturzaker, and I guess it must be a TV documentary about it, and maybe I'll go and watch it. In the third installment, we discover new details about how these summits came about and speak to those who were in the room when the two men met. What they saw stunned even the most seasoned diplomats, not least when Trump offered the North Korean dictator a lift home on Air Force One. That is amazing. I cannot believe that actually happened. What they saw, what was it? Let's see. It was this. I almost started reading the same paragraph again. Trump's second summit with Kim Jong-un in Hanoi, Vietnam, did not go according to plan. As negotiations over North Korea's nuclear program broke down, Trump left abruptly, saying to the press, "Sometimes you just have to walk." But before he departed, the then U.S. president did make one astonishing offer to Kim. Matthew Pottinger, the top Asia expert on Trump's National Security Council, told us President Trump offered Kim a lift home on Air Force One. The president knew that Kim had arrived on a multi-day train ride through China into Hanoi, and the president said, "I can get you home in 2 hours if you want." Kim declined, which is, by the way, equally amazing. And what weird political dynamics were involved in all this? I'm sure Trump figured, I'll be demonstrating American magnanimity and technological prowess by flying him home in 2 hours as opposed to a multi-day train ride, and he'll see how fancy Air Force One is, and that blah, 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 and North Korea being a poor nation, something, I guess they were thinking along those lines. But Kim Jong-un knows what it is and what it means and what it takes to extract luxurious surroundings for himself at the expense of his people. I don't think he's going to be particularly impressed with all that. But, I don't know. He's also something of a fanboy of American ostentatiousness in a way. So he might have very well accepted the thing. But, of course, Trump's idea is, well, I'll impress him with the plane. As opposed to, maybe you shouldn't, let the leader of an enemy state like North Korea just walk into the most advanced, highly technologically developed essentially a weapon that we've got, and be able to observe, hey, what's on board and what are the capabilities of the president when he's in flight, and let me check out the mobile nuclear command center and all that. I don't know how much he'd necessarily be able to glean from that, or maybe they wouldn't show him certain parts of the plane or discuss certain technologies. But on the other hand, Trump would probably blab some of that stuff. It was an amazing possible breach of every sort of national security protocol you could think of, and particularly interesting that it be one that, the president relies on to protect his life in emergencies, and let's just show that to our enemy about whom we're negotiating with around nuclear weapons. It was insane. Beyond stupid, insane. But maybe he knew he wouldn't take it up. Now that's interesting too. Like Kim, there might have been some political dynamics like, I can't arrive back in Pyongyang riding on, American handouts here, or be seen, riding in the lap of luxury from the Americans as a gift to me while the people suffer. But on the other hand, he's a totalitarian dictator, so what the hell does he care what the people think about it? I don't know. I'm not certain why he declined it. but it's amazing that he did. But remember, with these summits, Trump, he's offering rides on Air Force One, which, by the way, are handed out like rewards here in the United States to Americans, to members of Congress, although we now have a couple members of Congress who are questionable in their Americanism. I guess there is that. But you hand that out as a reward. What's the reward to which Kim is entitled at this point, especially when they haven't reached a deal? But, whatever. So he thought he would hand that out. He's saluting North Korean generals because he doesn't understand protocols, and he just sees military gear and salutes because he doesn't know what the hell to do with himself. The whole thing is pretty amazing. Now, there's more to it, and there's more discussion of the other things, the other diplomatic negotiations that Trump flubs. But honestly, the splashy one is the Air Force One thing. So I'll include the article for you in the roundup, and you can take a look at what other things he did wrong, as if you didn't know, and read on from there. Let's see. Other interesting stories of the day. We'll get to this one perhaps again later in the week, but there are some very strange developments in the Oath Keeper case being pursued by the FBI and Department of Justice. As you know, a couple of indictments coming down for various groups' roles in the insurrection. The Oath Keeper situation, let's just hit that one quick. Reuters reporting this one. Oath Keeper claims she met with Secret Service before Capitol riot. I think that one is actually easily explainable. I think it's a misunderstanding. And also, it's entirely possible that she's just totally lying. But this is a person that has, I guess, got motive to lie, but there's a lot of weird claims going on here, including the Washington Post's reporting about the Oath Keepers conspiracy and who's being charged in it, and that this one Oath Keeper affiliated person, I don't know, made some wild claims in her lawyer's response to the charging documents, including the claim that, I was duped, I was misled by the lies of President Trump, which is, of course, everything everyone was alleging in the impeachment trial, which Republicans denied was true or even possible. But lo and behold, a bunch of most, if not all, of the defendants are saying, yeah, that's exactly what happened. Not to mention all the videotape we have of people saying, yes, that's why I'm here. But now that they're charged, I guess you could dismiss some of that because, now that you're facing justice, you are willing to claim that you were duped, but you were actually quite happy to believe it or even pushed it yourself. May even have known what you were doing. But another weird claim is that this particular insurgent from the Oath Keepers says, I also believe that the violence at the Capitol insurrection was Antifa and not Trump supporters. This is a person who was charged with, actually being there and entering the Capitol building. So, the simplistic view of it is, gee whiz, I believe the president's lies, but I also believe the same liars who are the president and those aligned with the president, that the people who actually breached the Capitol were not me, even though I did do that. So that's pretty amazing. These guys, I believe their lies, including the lie that it wasn't me there, but it was in fact Antifa. Anyway, more nuanced reading of it, of course, is that she's saying, I entered the Capitol, I just didn't commit any violent acts while I was there, and so you should let me go on that. The people who were actually violent were Antifa. I was just milling about, taking pictures of the situation or something like that. Anyway, it's an odd situation, to say the least. As for talking to the Secret Service, the Oath Keepers were there on hand in some weird informal role. They claimed to be present at the rally at the Ellipse to provide security for the rally. Whether or not there was any sort of real formal arrangement with that is very doubtful. It was the president was appearing. Almost certainly that security was being provided by the Secret Service. But this person says, I met with a Secret Service person, not about the insurrection and storming of the Capitol, but presumably about security or whatever it is they were claiming to be doing at the rally. But guess what? As sensational as the charge is, the Secret Service says, no, we didn't meet with you or anybody else about security at this rally. And this person might be slightly off their rocker, and maybe we shouldn't read very much into it. But a lot of people were willing to read into it. Oh, see, there was coordination. The White House knew all about what was going on here. That may be true, but this might not necessarily be evidence of it. On the other hand, crazy things did happen, and there might be some nutcases inside the Secret Service as well who would do something stupid like this. Anyway, lots to get to about that. Lots more time to discuss it during the rest of the week. I've got to hand things over to Justice Putnam next for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and you know that there are many, many things that we missed out on that he'll have at the ready for you during his program coming up next.
From networksradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Lots to go over here, but here's one tidbit that he's got. A North Carolina GOP congressman says the best stimulus is one stripping workers of their rights during a pandemic. So stay tuned to figure out how that works and to find out which GOP congressman of North Carolina might that be. I'm curious. You should be too.